What if I told you that the biggest mistake of your life isn't failing? But never trying. There is a Japanese proverb that has changed the lives of many people around the world. Shippai wa Seikou no Moto. It seems complicated, right? But what if I told you it doesn't just mean learn from mistakes? What if it means that the very thing you are running from is the only path forward? The meaning is devastating. Failure is the foundation of success. It's not learn from your mistakes. It's not try again. It's much deeper than that. It's the idea that failure is not the opposite of success. Failure is the path to success. Researchers studying human behavior have discovered something fascinating. People who avoid failure at all costs are much more likely to live with deep regret throughout their lives. Do you know why this happens? Because this type of person lives limiting themselves, constantly repressing their own potential, afraid of the consequences, afraid of making mistakes and being the butt of jokes from their friends or family. And you know what's worse? Most of these people don't even realize they're doing it. These people simply don't try. They don't open that business. They don't take that course. They don't ask that person out. They don't invest in that dream. Why? Fear? Fear of failure. Fear of being rejected. Fear of losing money. Fear of looking stupid. And this fear kills your dreams before they even exist. But today we will explore more about this Japanese proverb, which has the power to free you from the chains of fear and has the power to make you start pursuing your best version. Chapter 1. The boy who is afraid to live. Let me tell you a story about a guy. Let's call him Michael. Michael was 22 years old. He had graduated from high school a few years ago. He got a job at an electronics store. The salary was low, but it paid the bills. Michael wasn't stupid. He had ideas. A had dreams. E had potential. But Michael had a very common problem. A was afraid fear of failure, and that fear controlled every decision he made in life. Every day Michael woke up at 6 o'clock in the morning. A.I.D. Kofian. A went work. A came home. He watched Netflix. He went to sleep. And the next day, the same thing. On weekends, it was the same routine. Nothing changed. And you know what's worse? Michael knew. He knew he was stuck. He had a dream of starting his own business. Since he was a child, he imagined owning a company, being the master of his own time, building something with his own hands. But whenever he thought about starting, that voice in his head would say, what if it doesn't work out? What if you lose all the money you've saved? What if people laugh at you? So, he did nothing. Michael also wanted to invest, to study the financial market, to make his money work for him. But whenever I was about to open an account with a brokerage firm, fear would creep in. What if you lose everything? And he would give up. Michael was thinking about going to college, maybe engineering, something that made sense. But every time she went to register, fear would creep in. What if you don't like the course? What if it's too difficult? And did nothing. And do you know what else was killing Michael inside? He had a girl at his work, Sarah. Michael had been in love with her for months. She was amazing, intelligent, funny, beautiful. Every time she passed by him, his heart raced. But whenever he mustered up the courage, fear would hit him harder. What if she says no? What if she laughs at you? What if you get rejected in front of everyone? So Michael did nothing, and Sarah remained there, smiling, and he just watched. You know what's interesting? Fear is necessary for human survival. It's a feeling that keeps us alert, that prevents us from doing dangerous things. In ancient times, the people who were more afraid generally lived longer. A brave person could be attacked by a wild animal and die, while the fearful ones who decided to stay in the tribe remained alive. However, this ancient mechanism of our brain today makes us think that everything is a mortal threat when in reality it is indunty. Think about it. If you go to talk to that person you like and they do you and want to go out with you, what will happen? Will your life end? Will you die? No. If the person says no, you might be sad for a few days, but soon after, you'll go on with your life normally. Now, think about it from another perspective. What if the person says yes? Perhaps you're missing out on something you've always dreamed of because you're afraid. But see, note this, the regret and pain of never having tried is far worse than the discomfort of failure. Chapter 2. The pain of not trying. Do you know what the saddest part of Michael's story was? He was suffering all day. He wasn't happy. He was just existing. He woke up every day knowing he could have more, knowing he deserved more. But he preferred to live with the pain of never having than to live with the discomfort of trying. Because trying meant taking a risk, and taking risks meant the possibility of failure. And failing in Michael's mind was the worst possible scenario. But you know what Michael didn't understand? He was already failing. Every day that he didn't try, he was failing. Failing to live the life he wanted. Failing to become who he could have been. Failing to be happy. A psychologist with years of experience in human behavior said something that should be on every wall in the world. The pain of regret is infinitely greater than the pain of temporary failure. Because failure hurts, but it passes. You try, you make mistakes, you learn, you adjust, you try again. But what about regret? Regret remains. He will be with you forever. And Michael was building a lifetime of regrets. He looked at his friends who took risks, who tried, who failed a few times but kept trying, and he saw these friends living, while he was merely surviving. He could feel it in his chest. ... Heavy ache. It wasn't the sharp pain of an actual failure. It was the chronic, gray numbness of atrophy, the feeling of a life unlived. He was building a lifetime of regrets, and the weight of what if was already becoming unbearable. Chapter 3. The day everything changed until one day something happened. Michael was at home, end of another ordinary day. Another day where nothing changed. He was browsing the internet aimlessly, just killing time. And suddenly he saw something, a post on a social network. A sentence in Japanese. Shippai wa Seikou no Moto. Failure is the foundation of success. Michael stopped. He read it again. And again. It didn't feel like an inspiration. It felt like an indictment. It was a mirror showing him exactly what he had done wrong. He wasn't just afraid of failure. He was rejecting the very foundation of success. He wasn't just avoiding pain. He was avoiding the path itself. He clicked. He started searching, and what he discovered changed everything. Shippai wa Seikou no Moto is not just a cute proverb. It's a philosophy of life. Michael discovered that this idea has been deeply rooted in Japanese culture for centuries. In Japan, failure is not seen as the opposite of success. It is seen as the necessary ingredient for success. Think about it. When you learn to walk, you fall many times. When you learn to speak, you make mistakes constantly. And it is precisely through these failures that you learn. But at some point in life, society teaches us that failure is bad, that making mistakes is shameful, and that ... that paralyzes us. Michael continued his research. He discovered that in Japanese companies, there's a culture of fail fast, learn fast. The idea is not to avoid mistakes. It's to make small mistakes early on. Test, fail, learn, adjust, try again. He read about Japanese martial arts where masters say that every fall on the mat is a lesson, not a failure. He read about the concept of Kaizen, continuous improvement through small steps. And Michael realized something. He had spent years of his life trying to avoid failure. And in the process, he avoided success as well. Because you can't have one without the other. Chapter 4. The change of perspective that night. Michael couldn't sleep. He spent hours thinking about all the times he didn't try, all the opportunities he let slip by, all the what-ifs that he never explored, and he felt angry. Not at others. At himself, anger at having wasted so much time. Anger at having let fear control him. Anger at having chosen the safety of mediocrity instead of the risk of greatness. But Michael also sensed something different, something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. Because he finally understood. Failure was not the enemy. The fear of trying, that was the real enemy. Shippai wa Chic. No Moto. Failure is the foundation of success. It's not, maybe you'll learn from your mistakes. It's, you need to fail to achieve real success. Michael realized that everyone he admired had failed. That businessman he followed on Instagram. He went bankrupt twice before getting it right. The difference wasn't that they didn't fail. The difference was that they tried, ... and they kept trying. Chapter 5. The first steps. The next day, Michael woke up feeling different. He looked in the mirror and made a promise to himself. I'm not going to let fear decide for me anymore. And he started small, because he understood that Shippai wa Seikou no Moto does not mean being reckless. It means taking smart risks. Michael had no family to support. He had no children. He had no great responsibilities. He had the greatest advantage anyone can have in life: freedom to fail. So he decided to use that. The first thing he did, he invited Sarah for coffee. Does it seem simple? But for Michael, it was terrifying. That voice in his head screamed, "Don't do that. What if she says no?" But Michael took a deep breath, and he reminded himself, failure is the foundation of success. If Seikou no, he would learn. He will grow. He would move on. But what if he didn't try? He would live the rest of his life wondering what if. Then Michael went over to her table. "Hi, Sarah. I know this might sound a little strange, but would you like to grab a coffee with me after work?" His heart nearly jumped out of his chest. Sarah looked at him. She smiled. "I thought you'd never ask me." "Of course I want to." Michael almost fainted. She was waiting. He had spent months suffering from a fear of something that was never real. Chapter 6. The domino effect. That coffee changed something in Michael. He proved to himself that fear was greater than reality. And once you break through one barrier, fear, the others start to fall as well. 2 weeks later, Michael opened his first account with a brokerage firm. He didn't invest everything he had. He set aside a small amount, an amount that if lost wouldn't destroy him. And he began to study. Did he make a mistake? Of course he did. Did you lose money in your first trades? Absolutely. But do you know what Michael did? He analyzed where he went wrong. He adjusted the strategy and he tried again. After that, Michael started working on his business idea. He didn't quit his job immediately. That wouldn't have been smart. His first product version, it was a complete failure. Nobody wanted to buy it. But instead of giving up, Michael asked, "Why?" And people spoke. "It's too expensive. It doesn't solve my real problem." And Michael adjusted. Second version, better, but it still hasn't taken off. Third version, he started selling slowly, but selling, and Michael realized something incredible. Each mistake was not a failure. It was feedback. It was the market teaching him how to get it right. A researcher who spent years studying successful people discovered that 100% of them failed multiple times. But the difference was in the way these people dealt with failure. Successful people viewed failure as data, as part of the process. Those who failed viewed failure as a form of identity. I failed, therefore I am a failure. And that change of perspective, that's the difference between achieving your dreams and living with regret. A neuroscientist discovered that our brain cannot differentiate between real fear and imagined fear. When Michael was afraid to call Sarah, his brain reacted as if he were facing a predator. But the truth, there was no real danger. It was simply fear of discomfort, and this imaginary fear was preventing him from living. Chapter 7. The truth about risks. Now, let me make one thing perfectly clear. Shippai wa Seikou no Moto doesn't mean being irresponsible. It doesn't mean betting everything on red, ... If you have a family to support, you can't just drop everything and follow your dreams. That's not courage. That's recklessness. If you have children who depend on you, you need to be strategic. Calculated risks. Smart risks, ... This is not fear. This is wisdom. But if you're young, if you don't have major responsibilities, if you have the freedom to fail without destroying other people's lives, so you have a rare privilege, you can make mistakes. You can try. you might fail. And life will not end. And you know what's even crazier? The younger you are, the more you should be trying and failing. This is the stage when the cost of failure is lowest. Michael was 22 years old, and yet he was living as if he had everything to lose, when in fact, he had everything to gain. Chapter 8. 1 year later, 1 year after that night, his life was completely different. He was still working at the electronics store, but now it was a conscious choice, not a prison, because his business was growing. Michael was investing regularly. Had he already suffered losses? Of course, several times. But he had also made a profit. And you know what else? Michael and Sarah had been dating for 8 months, but the biggest change wasn't external. It was internal. He was still afraid. Of course, fear is human, but now he understood. Fear was not a sign to stop. It was a sign that he was growing up. Every time he felt afraid, he asked himself, what's the worst that could happen? Can I handle this? And most of the time the answer was yes.